As Tracy said, the first 5 recommendations really talked about the new definition of sustainable water infrastructure in the 21st century and kind of managing that within the watershed context. And recommendations 6 through 10 focus more on water utility governance and management within that structure of sustainable water infrastructure and watershed approach. As Tracy, I'm not going to read each of them. They're all on pages 28 through 30. But they're going to try to get kind of general themes, define some of the general themes that frame these 5 recommendations. And one is that it recognizes and reinforces that customers of drinking water and wastewater utilities have always, will always, and should always be the principal source of funds by directly paying for the cost of the service that they receive. Water is a scarce and precious resource. We've always known that. We're really understanding it more now. And customers need transparent and efficient price signals in order to make wise decisions about how much water they use, how much water they save, and what level of service they demand as customers. In order to provide those transparent and accurate and efficient price signals, utilities need to undertake each of the elements of the sustainable path that Wally talked about that are on pages 14 and 15 there. It's easy to talk about whether it be full cost pricing or price signals, but unless you know, as Wally has stated, what your objectives are, what your needs are as a system, in a system within a watershed, and what can be captured by that utility, and what partnerships the utility needs to have, as I said, internally and externally, you're not able to provide your customers with the information that they need to be full partners in making wise use of our water resources. We've talked a lot about watersheds and institutions, but at the end of the day, it's all people's economic actors on households and businesses that have to make decisions on a daily basis, guided by good managers and good regulation and good governance. But we're all part of this. It's very easy for people to forget that someone should be taking care of things, and we are, each of us are someone's. Other issue that these recommendations state is that even with all the good that comes along the sustainable path, some communities, and particularly some households, you're going to stumble on their specific journey along the sustainable path that we think we've laid out. And that we, utilities and all levels of government, and each of us as customers and citizens, should provide principled and targeted assistance to help these communities and these households be part of the sustainable path. And this begins with planning and managerial and technical assistance, perhaps especially in some smaller communities without the capacity to do so on their own, to help them build their version of the sustainable path. And it also includes financial assistance to low-income households to help them afford cost-of-service rates, recognizing that some small communities have such high levels of poverty that essentially this means community-level assistance. You'll find on page 21 a box on affordability. It's something that the dialogue spent a lot of time on, trying to identify affordability, because it really drives so many decisions from a funding, a financing, regulatory, enforcement issues. And we all need to get our handle around that. And you'll see in the recommendations focus on working at the federal, state, utility level, as well as with community organizations to help communities at the same time having all communities and households understand the value of the water and pay and recognize the full value of the service, even if they need assistance in paying for that. We spent a bit of time, and you'll see in there the federal role on the sustainable path as well. And the federal government does have an important role to play as a partner in building the sustainable path, with strategically helping lead the nation towards this 21st century approach to water infrastructure through incentives and for targeted funding for a lot of the priorities that we heard about from Catherine: green infrastructure, water and energy, climate change adaptation, research and development, and again, very targeted assistance towards communities and households that are truly struggling with their own sustainable path. One to kind of get back to, as David said, and I believe Wally mentioned, that we started with the discussion on kind of finance. Where's money come from, and where's the capital sources of sustainable infrastructure in this country? And as the dialogue progressed, we kind of evolved towards this. Not that it doesn't matter where the money comes from, where the capital comes from, but what really matters is how and in what you invest that capital. And that really led us towards this whole sustainable path and the new definition of infrastructure for the 21st century. Because at the end of the day, whether it be as a utility customer or a taxpayer, the ultimate source of funds is the citizens and the businesses in this country. And it's whatever source of the funds, whether it be the user rates, which are the principal by far source of capital, whether it be state revolving loan funds, whether it be federal grants or debt or equity investment from private sectors. Again, there's one ultimate source of funds. But each of those types of sources of funds can induce very different behavior at the utility management level and the customer level. And I think what we ended up doing is really focusing on how best, what mix, without making judgments on any of those sources of capital, how best to manage the utilities within the watershed structure to induce the right behaviors that will lead towards a much more sustainable path forward. So again, it was very enlightening, certainly to me and I think to all of us. And I'd like to